In 2008, America's financial system didn't just stumble, it nearly collapsed. Banks stopped trusting each other, credit froze, ATMs were at risk of shutting down. People were told this was an emergency, a once-in-a-century crisis. So the U.S. government made a decision that almost nobody questioned. They hired a private company to help save the entire system. But here's the part most people never noticed. That same company was also one of the largest investors in the very banks being rescued. There was no public vote, no election, no national debate, just a quiet decision that would permanently change how financial power works in America. What makes this kind of power different is that it doesn't need authority on paper. There is no official title that says Controller of America's Bailouts. No law was passed to grant this influence, no constitutional amendment. And yet, when markets panic, decisions flow through the same private channels, not because anyone was forced to do so, but because there was no alternative ready. In moments of crisis, speed matters more than rules, and whoever can move the fastest sets the terms. Most Americans have never heard his name. He's not a president. He's not a senator. He doesn't give speeches that go viral. Yet when markets panic, when governments lose control, he is always there. He sits at a rare intersection between Wall Street and Washington, between public authority and private capital. Presidents rotate every 4 or 8 years. Political parties rise and fall. But during every major financial emergency, the same quiet figure remains in position. Not elected, not appointed by voters, just trusted. A natural question follows. Why didn't the government handle this internally? The answer is uncomfortable. Modern financial markets are too complex, too interconnected, too fast. Governments regulate markets, but they don't operate inside them daily. Private financial firms do. They build the models. They track the data. They simulate worst-case scenarios every day. Over time, expertise quietly shifted, not through conspiracy, but through dependency. And once dependency is created, power follows. When the 2008 crisis hit, the government faced a problem. They didn't know what they were dealing with. No one could clearly answer which assets were worthless, which banks could survive, which ones would drag the system down. Time was running out. Instead of handling this internally, the government outsourced the problem. One private firm was given unprecedented access to confidential balance sheets, toxic mortgage portfolios, derivatives no one fully understood, the real-time plumbing of the global financial system. This firm wasn't just analyzing the crisis, it was inside it. And at the same time, it was financially exposed to the outcome, helping decide which institutions lived while holding investments in them. This wasn't illegal, but it was something new. At the time, people told themselves a story. This is temporary. This is an emergency. This will never happen again. But emergencies have a strange habit. They create precedents. Once the crisis passed, the structure remained. Governments learned something important. In moments of panic, they could move faster by relying on private power. And private power learned something too. If you become essential during crises, you are never truly replaced. Most people think of power as something visible. Presidents, laws, military force. But modern power looks different. It lives in infrastructure. Who controls the systems that governments rely on during emergencies? Who understands the data when everyone else is guessing? That's where real influence sits today. Not on television, not in debates, but inside systems that are activated only when things go wrong. Every crisis does the same thing. It justifies extraordinary actions. People are told this is temporary, this is necessary, there's no time to question it. And most people agree, because fear makes scrutiny feel irresponsible. But when the crisis ends, the systems built during panic don't disappear. They become normalized. What was once unthinkable becomes routine. In 2020, the world shut down. Markets crashed in days. Entire industries froze. Once again, the Federal Reserve stepped in. But this time, the scale was different. Not just banks, not just liquidity. The Fed entered markets it had never touched before. Corporate bonds, exchange-traded funds, private credit markets, and once again, a private firm was chosen to execute the plan. Same structure, same logic. What looked like coincidence in 2008 now looked like a system. Traditional power needed force. Modern power needs relevance. It doesn't order governments around. It makes itself impossible to ignore. If tomorrow policymakers tried to remove this influence, they would face a problem. Who replaces it? Who already has the data, the systems, the experience? Power like this isn't defended with weapons. It's defended by necessity. Today, this firm manages over $9 trillion. That number is hard to visualize. It's larger than the economy of Japan, larger than Germany, larger than almost every country on Earth. Through its data systems, it monitors risk across the global economy. Banks, pension funds, governments, central banks. It doesn't need to control markets directly. It influences how decisions are made when fear takes over. Another question often goes unasked. Why isn't this debated more openly? Part of the answer is complexity. The system is too technical, too abstract. Most people don't feel its effects directly until something breaks. And by then, the response has already been decided. By the time the public notices, the moment to question it has passed. The man behind this power didn't begin at the top. Early in his career, he failed publicly. He was blamed. His reputation was damaged. That failure shaped him. Instead of chasing influence through politics, he built influence through necessity. He didn't try to command governments. He made himself indispensable. Not loud, not visible, just unavoidable. This isn't about secret meetings in dark rooms. It's about inertia. Once a system works under pressure, it gets reused. Again and again. Until no one remembers a time before it. Not because anyone planned it that way, but because replacing it feels too risky. For most people, this kind of power feels distant. There's no headline that says your life was changed today. No announcement, no warning. And yet, the effects are real. When bailouts happen, markets stabilize. When markets stabilize, asset prices rise. And when asset prices rise, those who already own assets benefit first. Homes become less affordable. Stocks recover faster than wages. Pensions depend on decisions most workers never see. Nothing illegal happens. Nothing dramatic. Just quiet shifts in who benefits and who waits. This is why these systems rarely face public resistance. They don't feel like control. They feel like normal life. People don't protest spreadsheets. They don't march against data models. By the time the consequences are visible, the mechanism that caused them is already forgotten. There is one question almost never asked. What happens if the system designed to stabilize markets becomes the source of instability itself? Not through malice, not through intent, but through scale. When a single framework influences how risk is measured, how assets are priced, how fear is interpreted, its assumptions matter. If those assumptions are wrong, the consequences aren't local. They are global. Financial systems are built on models. Models are built on historical data. And history, by definition, only explains what already happened. Crises rarely repeat themselves in the same form. They rhyme. So what happens when the next crisis doesn't fit the model? When risk doesn't appear where it's expected? When correlations break? When markets move faster than the data updates? In a world where many institutions rely on similar frameworks, diversity of judgment quietly disappears. Everyone sees the same signals. Everyone reacts the same way. At the same time, stability can turn into fragility. Not because anyone coordinated it, but because everyone trusted the same tools. This isn't a warning. It's a trade-off. Efficiency over redundancy. Speed over diversity, consistency over disagreement. The same features that make these systems powerful during crises also concentrate risk. And concentrated risk doesn't announce itself. It builds silently. The paradox is simple. The more a system is trusted, the less it is questioned. And the less it is questioned, the more its blind spots matter. Not because the people inside it are careless, but because no system, no matter how advanced, can see everything. So the question isn't whether these systems work. They clearly do. The question is whether we understand what we're depending on, and whether dependence itself has quietly become the point of failure. Modern power doesn't arrive with soldiers. It arrives with dashboards. It doesn't demand obedience. It creates reliance. And reliance is far more stable than force, because once a system becomes essential, questioning it feels dangerous. This is where democracy begins to feel abstract. Votes happen every few years, but crisis decisions happen overnight. Elected officials debate policy. But emergency responses bypass debate entirely. Speed replaces deliberation. Expertise replaces accountability. Not because anyone voted for it, but because hesitation feels riskier than trust. And that's the quiet trade-off most people never agreed to. Stability in exchange for transparency. Speed in exchange for oversight. A system that works well enough that no one wants to touch it until the next crisis. And when that moment comes, the decision won't feel shocking. It will feel familiar. The same channels will activate. The same structures will respond. The same invisible systems will move trillions before most people even realize something has happened. Not because they are evil, not because they are illegal, but because they've become normal. And the most powerful systems in the world are rarely the ones you fear. They are the ones you stop noticing. By now, you may already suspect the name. The man is Larry Fink. And the company is BlackRock. They weren't elected. They weren't appointed by voters. But in moments when the system is about to break, they're the ones governments keep calling. In the next video, we'll break down exactly what they were hired to do and what happened after the crisis was over.